Welcome to the Shower Epiphanies podcast, where we explore your hidden thoughts and desires, revealing your greatest drop the mic moments. Now, here's your host, Art Costello.
Welcome to the Shower Epiphanies podcast. Today, I am honored to have Justin Womack on. He's a digital marketing specialist, copywriter, speaker, and co-host of the Popular Marketing Geeks, a top 10 podcast in the business marketing category on iTunes. He's the owner of JMac Media, started his own business after a decade of traditional employment where he felt emotionally bankrupt and found himself building the dreams of others before his own. His journey from employee to entrepreneur, fast-tracked from a near-fatal accident, took place where his car rolled upside down underwater and he spent 2 months in ICU. After nearly drowning in dirty water, he developed a condition known as ARDS, due to fungal infections in his lungs, and was kept in a medically induced coma for nearly 30 days. The accident and the subsequent recovery gave him the perspective on life and the drive to follow his dreams in launching his own business. Since the accident, he started his own company, spoken for organizations like Marsh and McLennan and AIG, and launched a top marketing podcast with past guests including Pat Flynn, Dan Locke, Ryan Letescu, John Lee Dumas, and he also recently, and congratulations, became the father of Jacob, his son. Welcome to the show, Justin. Glad to have you on.
Yes, thank you, Art. Happy to be here.
Can you tell us your story, starting back as far as you want to go?
Yeah, I can do that. Well, I mean, your show here is called Shower Epiphanies, and I know we're getting into kind of like epiphanies of what we've discovered during our lifespan, I imagine. So going back, I think I was born as an entrepreneur. I do think that there is a genetic and I think nature and nurture. I'm one of those people that believes that both play into the outcome of who you become ultimately. But I do think I was born with that entrepreneurial gene. And ever since I can remember being a kid, I remember being at my grandparents' house and I would try to sell them back their own drinks. And go hijack the area where they were serving drinks and try to sell them to them. And things like I was always obsessed with garage sales, baseball cards, just areas are looking for ways to make money from a very, very young age. I don't think I had the mentor in my life that nurtured that vision, but I had that desire in me. And so what happened, I guess, is that I got to my high school years and I think I fell off the track of kind of just pursuing what I wanted and fell into the trap of kind of just living off impulses. And that included things like over partying, things like just looking at where's an easy way to make some money and I think I was looking for easier paths in life. And so when I reached the end of high school and went to college, I think my decisions were based on what's going to look the best or what's going to make me look the smartest and what's going to take me to a fast, easy path or a tradition. And I think I fell into the trap of like traditional path of life.
Right.
So going into college, first and foremost, I think my priorities were very mixed up. I went to UC Santa Barbara, but I didn't go there because it was a great school. And it is a great school. I went there because it was a party school.
Like San Diego State? That's where I went.
Yeah, I'm sure. San Diego State was the same way. But yeah, I mean, I kind of I've had these mixed priorities. So I went there and there was no path, no plan. And so I started taking classes all over the map. And ultimately, I decided I was going to become an engineer because engineers made a lot of money and it seemed like a good path. But I started getting into the higher level math classes like calculus and getting into, the advanced concepts like derivatives. And it was just not registering for me. And it wasn't something I had passion in. But I had pursued kind of this engineering path for a while. So I had taken like chemistry and I did well in that. I had taken like organic chemistry, physics, all these kind of higher end classes. And so I decided that I kind of instead wanted to go in the psychology route, which I know you majored in psych.
Right.
Over at UC Santa Barbara at the time, they had introduced a new program on biopsychology, which is essentially neuroscience. So I ended up going that route. And so my major over at UC Santa Barbara was biopsychology, and that essentially is the biology of the brain. So we're looking at things like neurons, synapses, all the fun stuff, lots of neurotransmitters. There were classes on psychopharmacology, how drugs affect your system. So I studied this path and I enjoyed the material. Again, my priorities were mixed up at the time. So my efforts were not where they should have been in terms of really learning the material for retention rather than just a grade. I've always been one of those people that can pretty much put in half-ass effort and get an A in school for whatever the reason that is. And that's not always a good thing. Let me tell you, it doesn't mean I'm learning the material. It just means I know how to manipulate the system.
I know the feeling.
Yeah. Because it's interesting. It's always just kind of been my pattern is that, I guess I just pick up on certain concepts really well. I'm a great test taker. I mean, I think a lot of times I could take a test blind and get at least a C+ in that range just because I can kind of figure things out and recognize some patterns.
Mine was if I could write it. If I had multiple choice and all that stuff, I blew it. But if it was anything that I had articulated, then I excelled in it. So it was a little different on my end.
Well, I mean, I was always somebody that was complimented on my writing skills from a young age as well. So I can relate to that where you can kind of BS your way through writing and you can make everything sound really good, even if it's kind of just flowery words and a lot of BS. I think I had that gift as well. So
it's a good gift to have.
It can, it really can be, and it can take you pretty far. But it's funny, that also has gotten me in trouble at times when there were situations where I needed to be straight and to the point, and I went way too flowery and way too poetic with my words, and it was just like, what are you sending me here?
Well, you're a copywriter. I mean, or you've done copywriting.
Yeah.
And, when you're doing that, it's a blessing to be able to eloquently paint pictures.
Yeah, and it's a very different skill than your English class. The way you write your English essay is going to be very different from a copywriting standpoint.
Boy, ain't that the truth.
Yes, it's because grammar is not as important. Short sentences, they're not going to be grammatically correct. It's more conversational in tone. It's formatted in a way where short sentences are preferred. Contractions are all good. And so, you're writing for persuasion versus writing for entertainment or education or for other purposes. Mm-hmm. So, persuasive writing is an entirely different animal than the way I would write a traditional essay or something at school. And we could talk more about that in a minute here.
Yep.
But kind of going back to my story, finishing up at UC Santa Barbara, ultimately I did graduate. And while I was a student, I had randomly stumbled upon an opportunity to work in the insurance industry. And I was doing that while I was an undergrad, kind of just basic job, doing some customer service and doing some helping a home insurance company process. Like every time that a real estate agent has to go through their closing process, they need evidence of insurance. So I would be the guy adding the mortgage clause onto an insurance policy and then faxing it to the agent and doing that for a while, which was a pretty basic job, but something I got into. But when I graduated from college, they offered me a full-time job. And I think just not thinking from a long-term perspective, I was just kind of thinking in the moment. I ended up taking it because they offered the most money at the time, it was about $35,000 a year, which was more than I had made previously. But again, it wasn't well thought out strategy for what the groundwork I had laid out and things like that. And it wasn't long before I found myself working 40 hours a week, 50 hours a week in a job that was like absolutely miserable and what I would describe as like soul deadening to the point where all I lived for the weekends. I lived for 5 p.m. getting out of work. And so it was, a weird time in my life because it was so purposeless. And if you've ever seen the movie Office Space, I would say, like, if you've ever worked in this kind of field, that movie is like dead on accurate because that's how I felt. I felt the need that if I could do anything in life, it would have been doing nothing. All I wanted to do was not do anything.
That would have lasted about a few weeks.
It would have, yes, definitely. But that's how spiritually bankrupt I was and lost. And because, I was working for essentially an hourly check, and money is not necessarily my biggest driver. And so there was just nothing there for me. And it just felt like one big hamster wheel of life where, it was like, is this all there is? Is this all I'm going to do for the rest of my life? Just keep doing this like same pattern, like daily forever and ever?
The need to have closure in any given situation is sheer human nature. And when it comes to romantic relationships, this desire skyrockets. Has your previously failed relationship left you in immense pain? It's not uncommon for people to shy away from a new relationship after their first one fails miserably. The fear of the unknown makes them hide in a shell to prevent any future heartbreak. Relatable? Despite wanting to love and be loved, you can't take the plunge if your mind and heart are still locked somewhere in the past. Maybe you aren't aware of the power of releasing the past, or perhaps you don't know how to do it. Art Costello in his online course teaches the art of moving on from bad places to happier, more stable ones. This course can change your life for good, helping you beat all kinds of negativity on the road to eternal bliss. Sign up now before the gloominess gets the better of you at expectationacademy.com.
I think that we all kind of go through that phase when we're doing things, even sometimes when it's something that we're really into and really like. But I think that at some point, we just kind of question things and then something triggers us to change.
Absolutely. And I think, after doing this, I guess I got involved in this company for the first company I worked for, I was working there for about 4 years-ish. And I knew I needed to change something. Unfortunately, I didn't quite get what I needed to change. At the time, I was just kind of like, okay, I have to get out of here. I can't be here any longer. But my next path kind of found me in the same industry, just kind of transitioning to a more commission-based role. So that was kind of my first baby step moving towards entrepreneurship, because that's kind of like a step closer to it. It's still very much working for somebody else. They control your schedule. Not at all really an entrepreneur, but it's the step towards that direction. So I switched companies. I got a job as a sales agent where I was purely selling insurance and paid entirely on commission structure. And it was interesting because I was the guy that would have flashes of brilliance and flashes of being terrible. So I think when I started, I was like one of the bottom agents. And then all of a sudden, like out of nowhere, one of the months, I was number one in the entire region out of like 80 agents. And they didn't even know what happened. So
you worked hard.
Yeah, that particular month, I was really, really jamming, working and coming in, working probably 60 hours a week that entire month. And so it was kind of like this thing in my life where I would have these flashes of brilliance and then I would fall back into my poor me pattern of like kind of getting trapped in that mindset again. I just don't want to do this forever. Like I can't see myself continuing to work like this forever. And finally, I can't remember exactly what triggered it, but there was a time when I exited from that industry and I decided that I was going to find something that I loved and follow my passion. And so I kind of went to this part where I was like, okay, let's explore different options here. And one of the things I've always loved as a kid, even to this day, is movies. So I've always been a huge movie buff, big fan of action movies, big fan of comedies, just all movies in general, to the point where I go to like movie blogs. I've been reading about them. I'm way more knowledgeable than I ever should be. I probably wasted a bunch of my brain cells learning stuff that I have no need to learn, but I know it. So I got a job working as a production assistant on a movie set and quickly came to find that it was just as bad, if not worse, than anything I had done in the insurance industry.
Lots of hours.
I was working even more hours than I was there, and working for a director that was not exactly the nicest dude. And, and I was working on a movie it was kind of interesting to meet some like B-list celebrities. We had like Eric Roberts and Corey Feldman in the movie, but it was not what I was thinking. It wasn't what I was looking for. I was still lost. And during this time, somehow I ended up kind of going back to like interests that I've had in the past again and thinking about like personal development, personal growth. And I've always been a fan of what Tony Robbins did. I ingested his material in snippets in my youth, but never really dove deep into it. I had known that he had kind of based his stuff off of NLP, which is neuro-linguistic programming, which is a sort of modeling of human behavior and human excellence. And so I ended up finding a seminar and somebody that taught NLP, and I decided I was going to try this now. And this was not from an employment standpoint, but just from, let me see if I can adopt some of these skills and use these to change my life kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And so I attended my first seminar in 2013. First time I'd ever been to a seminar, first time I'd ever been exposed to a higher end offer, which was I think like 8,000 or 10,000 at the time. And I had purchased the big program, which was something, a big stretch for me at the time. And what was interesting is one of the guest speakers at that seminar, I also bought into his seminar. And within like 2 months of attending, I ended up with an opportunity to work for him on the back end of his business. So it was kind of one of those things where just by happenstance, I attended this event, met this person, and it put me on a path to go behind the scenes in the seminar industry. And so for about 6 months, I went full-time in the back end of the seminar industry. And I quickly found that, well, the work wasn't ideal because it was, again, lots of hours working for a hardcore entrepreneur, 7-figure business, and lots of work. But the people that I was connecting with, I absolutely loved. And I realized I was in the right community. So for the first time, I felt like, okay, this is the right industry.
Has anyone ever inspired you to discover a happier, healthier, and more fulfilled you? It is a magical experience, isn't it? Inspiration is indeed very powerful, yet it's often undermined. It can lift you from the ground to the sky in no time. Have you ever thought about returning the favor by inspiring the people around you? If you don't think you have it in you, we have good news for you. Art Costello's online course has everything you need to learn to supercharge yourself and shape your character into a powerful personality. Get ready to discover your strengths and unleash the creativity within. Don't believe it? Check it out yourself by signing up for this life-changing course at expectationacademy.com. That's expectationacademy.com.
Was that your big epiphany when you figured it out that you were at the right?
I think so. Because even though things got hard at times, I could still find motivation. Even though it was hard, it wasn't that same trapped feeling that I felt working in the offices in my cubicle in my isolated state. My epiphany was, okay, this is where my people are. These are the people that like kind of understand me. These are the people that I can associate with. And so I knew something was right there. Was
it your gut that told you that, or was it your head?
I would say it was my gut. Because I think my head kind of played it both ways. And there were times when my head was like, wait a minute, you're still working too many hours. You know, you're supposed to be following Tim Ferriss's advice and working 4 hours a week.
Yeah. Well, one of my big things is that people, and I preach it from the stage, I preach it in my book, I preach it almost everywhere, is people need to listen to their gut because your gut will never lie to you.
Yeah.
And it's important.
And I agree with you 100% on that. Because I think that's where, it just might historically, on a subconscious level, I think we register things on a cellular gut level much more accurately than we necessarily do when we've put the filters through our own head.
Well, with NLP and everything, I think there's reason to believe that. And I believe that the body works synergistically with your soul, your spirit, and your consciousness. And, it's how you manage it all and what you listen to. But when you start listening to it, to yourself through your gut, it just never will lie to you, because your brain, you're going to say, okay, this looks good, this part of it looks good, this doesn't, and you start questioning. Where I found with me, and I found this in Vietnam as a Marine, I was a machine gunner in the Marine Corps. And when I was in Vietnam, I had this intuitiveness about my surroundings. And because I was there so early, we weren't fighting directly with the Viet Cong or the North Vietnamese, it was with the insurgents and the guerrilla warfare, and they would hide in a bush. And instinctively, I knew where they were quite often because I listened to my gut. And a lot of guys didn't, and it got them in trouble. And I think it's where I learned that my gut is what I needed to trust in. So that was just a little bit of my story in there.
Yeah. And I think that in and of itself is an amazing insight, because yes, I 100% agree with you that from wherever that's coming from, we're getting fed the right information. It's just, are we adept enough to listen to it?
That's a big truth.
Yeah.
Right there.
And so with my journey, working on the back end of the seminar industry, and things I loved about it, I loved the events, I loved the people, I loved connecting with these high level thinkers. And, he had a lot of JV partners. So I was connecting with a lot of top names at the time. But ultimately, there was still that lack of freedom. I was in a relationship at the time, and I was finding myself like unable to see my girlfriend, like barely, because I was spending so much time working on this guy's business and so little time, following my own dreams, my own passions, things like that. Again, I was building somebody else's dream. And so while this all happened, this is the groundwork for when my accident happened. And whatever it was, like overworked, whatever, I lost control of my car. I went over the side of a small bridge, I guess you'd call it. Mm-hmm. And my car impacted vertically straight down. I got knocked unconscious from the impact, and then it tilted, and then it basically landed vertically face down and then landed upside down, but into a creek bed that was filthy, filthy water. So it was very, very dirty, and I was unconscious underwater in a car, basically with a ticking clock on how long I was going to live. And a witness that saw it happen actually jumped out of his car, dove into the water, somehow got the door open. I've connected with him since, and I see him now about at least once a year, if not more. Somehow got the door open, came up and like yelled out because there were other people standing around. Now a crowd had gathered. And he's basically like, does anyone have a knife? Does anyone have a knife? I got to cut the seatbelt off because I was in my seatbelt. And nobody had a knife. So he says he dove back in. Water was like pitch black, couldn't see a thing. And he says he blacked out because he was so stressed. And to him, which is for whatever the reason, he felt the stress of my life on his hands.
Wow.
And so, I was amazingly fortunate to have somebody like that was there at that time to be there. So he somehow, the next thing he remembers, I'm being pulled out. He doesn't remember a thing about how it happened, but it happened. And then I was pulled off to the side of the kind of swam into the side of the creek bed. And then there happened to be like an off-duty lifeguard that was also there.
Wow.
That started doing CPR. And it was like the synchronicity of like who was there to bail me out from something that really could have killed me on multiple occasions. First and foremost, the accident. Second, which I'll talk about, is because the water was so dirty and I aspirated so much dirty water, I developed major fungal infections in my lungs. And to the point where I had something called Aspergillus pneumonia. So it's like Aspergillus is a common fungus in a lot of things, but when it grows in your lungs, that's a problem. And then that developed into a condition called ARDS, which is acute respiratory distress syndrome.
Right. It
was described to me as basically your lungs hardened to cardboard, and the mortality rate on that is around 70 to 80%, depending on your age. So at the time I was 30, 31-ish. And so doctors, nurses called my family, called my girlfriend, basically said, you need to get down here. And when they got there, the expectation was essentially that I would not survive the night. That was kind of like they were preparing for the worst, obviously.
That was their expectation.
So I was ultimately put into a 30-day medical coma during this. I have no recollection of what actually happened, but from the events described to me, that's how it was described to me, yes.
I believe that was their expectation, but your expectation was to live because you're still with us. And your expectation is so ingrained in you at birth to survive that I believe that is part of your story of overcoming, and you've done it time and time again. See, overcoming isn't just about big major things. It's about little hurdles every day. And when we have this innate, and you talked about this innate entrepreneurship, my thing to you is I think that you have an innate expectation that drives you to overcome whatever challenges you face. And it's because we see our expectations in two ways, either faith or fear. When we fear things, it stops us. But when we have faith, it moves us through them. And I think that it's God-given. And I think that you've tapped into it and managed to do it. And I really, really am thrilled, Justin, that you were able to, because now we have you to share all of these beautiful things you are. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a interesting way to hear it from you, though. Just kind of makes me think of things because, yes, I always have, I have been a guy that's had a lot of adversity and not necessarily, I was fortunate to be born into, not very favorable economic conditions, things like that. But as far as emotional adversity, those kind of things, I have battled a lot in life, and I've found a way through, including things like sports. As a high school wrestler, that was one of the most emotionally taxing things that I had ever put myself through. But I found a way. And I remember that sport was a great metaphor because I think the first year that I was a wrestler, I won one or two matches, and it was tough. It was talk about putting your body through hell, putting your mind through hell, but coming out on the other side, it felt amazing. And then to go in my second year, it went up to 20 wins, and it just, it rose. It was it just shows the power of when you invest in something, the results do come. Sometimes they take time, and sometimes they take longer than you want them to, but they do come.
When we're challenged, it just seems those of us who, when we're challenged, dig deep into our core and beliefs, we just have this thing in us about always doing our best, and we learn how to manage all of those feelings, and it just makes us better. Challenges make us better. They help us grow to become who God wants us to be. And, we all have different views of who God is, and I leave that to people, but I believe in it, that there's a higher power. And I realize that some people don't believe that. But for me, I believe that this higher power has given us this ability, you and I and people like us, to really grow from our challenges. Other people, you could have half of the challenges you have and they stop dead in their tracks. They don't move forward. And it's so sad because they have the ability to move forward. They just don't.
Yeah. And I've seen that many, many times out.
Many, many times.
And whatever it is that gets in the way, yeah, it is sad to see somebody that has immense potential choose to use it differently. Mm-hmm. Now, coming back to the story, so when I went to the hospital, again, I was in a very, very bad state. Even though I had survived, I still was on a very, very uphill battle. And so early on, I think it was day 3 of me in the hospital, my lungs collapsed, and the doctors had told my now wife, girlfriend at the time, that I was going into multiple organ failure. And on top of that, my leg had turned purple, and they told my father that it was going to be life over limbs. So the expectation was set. They were about to do what's called a thoracotomy surgery to emergency to scrape fungus off my lungs. I guess it had gotten that bad. And if I somehow survived, I was going to lose a leg. And even that was like kind of deemed as a long shot. And before they even started this, I guess they brought the priest in to do a blessing. So it got very dark there for a little bit. Mm-hmm. But, again, I don't know. I was unconscious for all this, but I survived again. Somehow my leg is still fully intact. That healed itself quickly, apparently. It gets into the next phase, which was just and I was on a respirator at the time, being in this medical coma, but still being conscious somewhat. Because the entire time I was in it, I have very vivid dreams and memories of the time between my accident and waking up in the hospital. They were at the level of very real dreams that may have even been hallucinations, but physical metaphors of kind of what was going on outside of me. And they weren't pleasant because most of them were me battling to breathe in different, things that were kind of nonsensical, but they were me fighting for my life in my dreams constantly. And I just remember things like being pushed underwater, brought back up, pushed underwater, brought back up. I had dreams where I was in a hospital. So I kind of was incorporating this stuff, but I was being tortured by nurses. And it was bizarre, but it was I had this metaphorical battle going on in my head, and I was fighting for my life through these different kind of weird scenarios in my head. So it was
I don't remember my dreams, but so I think it's really, there's a beauty in it. You being able to, even though they may be scary, there's a beauty in being able to remember what you dream, because I don't remember any of my dreams.
I don't usually, but these, I guess, because I was in a long state of dreaming, I guess.
Yeah.
Those are very vivid, very memorable to this day. I still think about them.
Wow.
And ultimately, the other thing was they didn't know if I would be brain dead or if I would have brain functioning. So that was another thing. And for whatever reason, they chose not to do a scan. They were just going to wait for me to wake up. I forget what the reason for that decision was, but that was the decision. And so even after all this and surviving this part of it, it was is he going to wake up, and what level of cognition will be there? What level of, will he be the same person? Will he be a vegetable? All this was still there.
The unknowns.
A lot of unknowns. And so for me, I woke up pretty sure that most of my cognitive functions are still intact. I like to think they are.
I would say they are.
Yeah. It was one thing after the other, but I just kept overcoming those barriers or those things that kept coming in the way. And ultimately, eventually made it out of that hospital. It was a long journey, because when I woke up, I still had another 30 days in the ICU bed where I had 7 chest tubes, they were basically pumping stuff out of my body.
Yeah, your lungs and stuff.
Yeah, my lungs and body. And they transitioned from a respirator to a trach, but I had a trach in, so I couldn't talk. So all I could do was try to write things. So that was challenging, to not be able to talk. Plus I could barely move. So, I had to be adjusted in the bed to avoid bed sores, things like that. And then I had so much atrophy that toward the end, I couldn't lift my arms over my head. My body was so run down from atrophy from being in a hospital bed that long. And to this day, I still battle with some of the effects of the atrophy of being without moving your limbs for that long.
Yeah.
And so then the whole thing about kind of not relearning to walk, but rebuilding the strength to walk.
Right.
And doing it while my lungs were severely compromised.
Just breathing. What people don't realize is that even your breathing, when you're on a respirator for a long time, your lungs actually forget how to work.
Yeah.
Yep. And you have to rebuild all of those muscles, that almost completely all your muscles. That's amazing.
Yeah, because I had to work with the respiratory techs with that, and they would come in and we'd do something called sprinting, where they would take you out kind of off the respirator for short spurts of time while you're relearning to breathe on your own. And that was not a comfortable experience, I can tell you that.
Well, one of the things I do with expectations, when people tell me that they don't believe in expectations and that we shouldn't have expectations and all these other things, I'll tell them, take your right hand and put it over your nostrils, take your left hand and put it over your mouth, and now tell me you don't expect. You know exactly how that feels because you went through it, because when you're gasping for air, it is the most basic of expectations we have to breathe.
One of the things that's interesting, though, is that, after being in that hospital bed and being so kind of feeling helpless physically, it's amazing at the body's ability to rebuild itself. Because, when I was in the hospital bed and I couldn't stand on my own without help and couldn't do this, 3 or 4 months later, I wasn't fully myself, but I was walking again on my own, doing these things. And it's oftentimes, I think it's easy to fall into the trap that like things will never be back to what they were ever again because of what my current circumstances are. But if you think about it in terms of baby steps and in terms, of small victories, small accomplishments that accumulate over time, compound interest, if you will, it's amazing at what can be accomplished. Like Tony Robbins always says, people overestimate what they can do in a year and underestimate what they can do in a decade. And I think the same kind of thing, that same kind of metaphor holds true with the body and what's possible.
For me, the most powerful thing you said is baby steps, because I believe in baby steps, because I believe it takes baby steps to overcome anything. People are always in tune to the immediacy. They want everything now.
Yep.
And it doesn't work that way. We have to rebuild ourselves in baby steps. When I coach athletes, they don't go out and try to run a 9-9-100. They have to build up to it. And they do that by baby steps, and it's all about baby steps. And that's why athletes understand expectations probably better than most people, because they learn about baby steps and about expecting little miracles each way along the way. And the same for you. You had all these little miracles. And when you look at the big picture, it's one big miracle that you're with us, Justin. It's just incredible.
And I think from that same standpoint, if you look at things like whether it's health or business, but if you, let's say like you want to bench press 300 pounds, I can't read all the books on how to bench press 300 pounds. Just go into the gym today and bench press 300 pounds. I need to do the work and slowly build up to it. And also it is, a lot of people have that mindset where they want to go straight in and get the result on day one. And the people that actually are going to achieve it, though, are the ones that are going to go in and start where they're at. And sometimes that might even feel embarrassing to start where you're actually at because you want to project yourself at a higher level. But, if you laugh at the guy that's benching 100 pounds, maybe a month or two later, he comes back in and he's out, he's out benching you, those kind of things. Like It's the people that are willing to do the work, but also in the face of potential adversity. I'd call that adversity. It might be psychological. It might be in your own head. But yeah, even for me, like with that kind of atrophy, it wasn't easy for me to go back and like start to lift weights at such a low level. And I think I get trapped in my own head thinking people are watching me when they're really not. But but it's this kind of the human condition. Yeah.
People may be watching you and admiring you.
That's true too.
Sometimes we build these things in our heads that people are watching us because negative ideas, but sometimes people watch us through positive eyes and go, wow, isn't Justin Womack incredible? Look at him over there lifting 10-pound weights when everybody said he couldn't lift or wouldn't even live, Yeah. That's the beauty of perspective. We have a choice in our perspective, how we look at people. Some people may have looked at you negatively. Personally, I would never have looked at you negatively. And that's what separates us. I think it's what separates, and particularly in today's world, where there's so much negative going on around us, but that's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah, it's a whole nother conversation. Yes, that's a mentality standpoint.
Don't know which direction you want your life to take? Are you sinking deep down into the pit of uncertainties day by day? So, what's the secret to leading a happy, satisfied life? It's taking matters into your own hands. But what if the matters in question are a total blur? Art Costello's Expectation Academy course aims to tell you exactly how you can get some clarity in your life. This course can be your savior on your journey to reinventing yourself. While you certainly can't plan your whole future ahead, you can definitely control twists and turns your life takes. So what are you waiting for? Sign up for this course now at expectationacademy.com. Get a chance to broaden your horizons and add meaning to your life. That's expectationacademy.com.
I want to hear about how all of this got you where you are today with the businesses that you've created and the people that you're helping. I want to hear about that. What your epiphanies were and, what your ideas were that came along, and did you consider them epiphanies or, because sometimes people have these thoughts and you can call them thoughts or you can call them epiphanies. You can call them anything you really want to. The difference is when we take action upon them. Yeah. And you are a person of action. I know this for a fact.
Yeah. And I guess, when I was in that hospital bed, I just can't think back. And I had a lot of time to think, for one. My days, the best way to describe this is if you're in a hospital bed and you can't move, can't talk, my days felt like weeks. And I knew that I was, and I had tons of people tell me this too, but I kind of knew intuitively I had been spared for some reason. Whatever that was, I didn't necessarily know what that was. And I'm not even 100% sure what it is to this day. But for some reason, I'm still here. And I can't take that for granted. Being where I was, there were times where I was kind of begging to God, and I've never really been all a churchgoer or anything like that, but begging to whatever that God is, that, let me have one more chance at this. Let's see what I can do differently. Let me take action and live life the way I want to live life. Let me try doing it the way that I should have done it from day one. And so getting that second chance has been kind of the catalyst of, okay, now I have to do this now. I can either live my life going forward and try to get disability and try to live off the system and do nothing, or I can live my life and try to make something of it, knowing now what I know, that this thing can end in a heartbeat. And, it's not just, I'm not invincible. I mean, I have physical scars on my body that remind me of this every day.
I think you chose not to be a victim.
Yeah.
I think you have an overcoming overachiever mentality.
Yeah. Those are the two paths I felt like were placed in front of me. And so I wanted to do something better. And again, I kind of laid the groundwork by working on the back end of the seminar company, by kind of knowing that industry attracted me. And so, I've made a lot of mistakes along the way. I decided to go all in and just pursue this thing no matter what. I haven't been afraid of risk at all anymore. If I lose my money, I know there's ways back.
Uh-huh.
But I have to do this. I had to go for this. And so I think just kind of losing some of those basic fears, like the social fears or just the fear of financial instability, which were fears that I think were instilled in me from parents and things like that, that helped me kind of move forward in an area where I wouldn't have done in the past. As far as kind of coming forward, I've dove deep into a lot of reading. I mean, I do a lot of studying. I've always been kind of an intellectual guy. But what's kind of driven me and fascinated me has always been kind of human behavior, the way that people are influenced in marketing. And this is kind of the path that I now follow, while merging it with working with coaches, speakers, people in this expert personal development business space. But I'm fascinated, and I love interviewing people, just talking about what motivates you to do what you do, or how does somebody else convince you some solution that they're providing you is going to move you to action. And so I absolutely am fascinated, and I'm almost obsessed in some ways on understanding human behavior, understanding the way we express body language, understanding communication styles, the way that we see some people in the lens of being an authority and expert and not others. And so these are the kind of things that I've just gone all in on and built a business around this kind of ideas and this kind of work. Is that making sense to you? Or?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and I'm in alignment with you on that. A lot of what I do on this podcast is through people's stories. We garner what it takes, how you do it, just a lot of different things. Your story is really a testament to how to survive even the most horrendous of car accidents where you came close to death, and all of a sudden You're able to bring yourself out of it. No one can do that work for you. And you had to do this all yourself, Justin, all yourself. I mean, you had doctors and nurses and parents to support you around it. But the mental work and the physical work, rebuilding your lungs, rebuilding your body, all that is all your work. So it doesn't surprise me that you are where you are and where you're going, because you have that expectation. You may not call it an expectation. You may call it mindset or whatever. But I believe inside of you, you had this expectation that no matter what, you were going to survive this and live it and live the life that you wanted to live. I know from my experiences throughout my life, and I'm 72 years old now, I have seen so many people give in and give up and become the victims. It's not in your DNA. It's just not in your makeup. And to me, it's beautiful. It really helps other people see that they can do it too. And that's why you and I do what we do, because we want other people to realize their full potential. It's about nurturing other people's potential. And that's what we do. So, that's my thoughts.
It's well said. And another lesson, I think, is that this idea of resilience and, things can get really hard. But if I can be resilient and make it through the other end, I'm always going to be a stronger person. I'm always going to be a better person. I'm not going to make I'm going to have the opportunity to not make the same mistakes I made the first time. So it's the ability to adapt and learn from, learn the lessons of the past. And I can tell you that even though school came natural to me, test taking, many skills in business and life have not come natural to me. Many of these things I have struggled and worked my ass off to try to adopt and adapt in my life. But I've been willing to embarrass myself, or whatever you want to call it. I've been willing to suck to get better, because that's, I kind of learned that at a young age. That's what it takes for me anyway. It's been my journey, is that I have to be willing to be bad to become good. And there are some things that will come natural to me. I won't have to go through that journey, but I'd say many of the most important skills in business, like public speaking, things like this, I went through a lot to kind of get to where I am.
It's that resilience in you. It's that power of belief that you can do this, and you power through it. You believe yourself into existence. You don't let it knock you down. I hope, and I wanted to save a little bit of time, because I know that you're very proud of the birth of your son, Jacob. Mm-hmm. And you're going to be able to teach Jacob some of these skills that you've learned, and then it will make his life more valuable and he'll learn all these things from you. I mean, I know it because I have 3 children, and 2 boys and a girl, and I know what they've learned from me, and I see their lives. And now looking back, my children are probably your age, and I look at them and I'm so proud of them, because we were able to teach them things that really propelled them to where they are. I mean, they're not famous, they're not speakers, they're not that stuff, but each one in their own field is very successful, and they're able to take care of themselves and their families. And that's what you want.
Yeah, and that absolutely is what I want. I want to be able to teach him. And I know that sometimes you have to make your own mistakes to learn, but I think there are things that can be taught and passed down to save him from some of these mistakes that I made. But not to save him from everything, because I do believe in natural consequences being very important for people to learn. And maybe that just that insight, knowing that and not protecting him from some things, might help him also.
Yeah, let me give you some advice on that. You're going to teach him things, and he's going to go out and test them.
Yes, exactly.
And he's going to make his own mistakes. And he's going to say, dang, Dad was right. Yeah. Mom and Dad were right. And I shouldn't have done that, or I should have done that. And that's how he will learn. But he will have the mistake and learn from the mistake. Yes. And it will make him into, Jacob Womack, the Superman that he's going to be.
Yeah, I'm excited to see who that is.
Yeah.
It's just incredible to know that his life is only in existence because of the person that, saved my life, and kind of the whole synchronicity of my story leading to his birth. And that's one of the pieces of a legacy that wouldn't have been without that happening.
Isn't that amazing? I mean, it really, truly is amazing when I hear your story and I hear how you've overcome and achieved. It just brings goosebumps to me. I mean, because I've just seen so many times where people don't, or they let something stop them. And I'm just honored to know you, Justin. It's a great thing, I think. And it just goes to the power of knowing that, there's purpose in each and every one of us when we're willing to go out and just keep fighting for it, whether it be our lives or our mental state or overcoming things. When we're willing to fight for something so much, there's goodness comes out of it always. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Well, can you tell us what you've got coming up, where people can get a hold of you, what we got in store? And, we'll kind of wrap this up. And anything else you want to add?
Not really anything else I want to necessarily add. I mean, I think, again, it's, I could talk forever on, different lessons throughout different life, but I eventually get on tangents that'll go for totally different directions.
It's all good.
Yeah. Yeah. If anyone wants to connect with me, what I would offer is like 15 minutes of my time. They can go to timewithjustin.com and book a 15-minute session with me we can talk about whether it's the idea of like mindset coaching, what we've kind of the stuff that we've talked about today, or whether you want to talk about marketing, because that's kind of my business, is getting into the bread and butter of building authority, building a brand, and doing it in a very specific, replicatable path. So I'd be happy to provide anyone with that kind of a strategy session or a guidance session. And beyond that, you can find me. I have a podcast, the Marketing Geeks podcast. I'm in the process of launching my own show. The Marketing Geeks has a co-host of mine, and we're kind of limited to business. So I will be launching my own show shortly. I haven't even settled on a title yet, but I've already started recording interviews. The idea will be more focused on personal development, but also on behavior and those kind of outcomes. So that's what I got going on. This is an exciting conversation. I love talking with you, Art, and thank you for pulling some of the stuff out of me.
Well, I really enjoy you, Justin, and I'm hoping that we can work together, and I'm always here to help you. And that's just my nature. I love helping people. I've got a lot of experience in a lot of different areas. So
yeah, I can feel that from you. You come across very authentic.
Well, I am me. I mean, I've learned over the years that I can't be anything else but me, and I try to help people as much as I can. So, and I'm going to encourage the audience, reach out to Justin. He's got a world of experience and knowledge that can help you become the person that you want to be. You all know where you can get a hold of me, expectationtherapy.com. I look forward to us all connecting and helping each other grow and live up to the expectations that God has for each and every one of us. Thank you, Justin.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the show. Drop us your comments and questions with what you want answered on the show. You can subscribe on iTunes and Binge Network. You can also get more information on the website, expectationtherapy.com.